Julia flipped her hair over one shoulder, her red-lacquered nails tapping against the handle of her suitcase. The smirk on her lips was almost too wide, almost too pleased with herself, but Ryan didn't say a word. He just stood there, arms folded, watching her with that same calm expression he always had. That damn infuriating calm. "You're too simple for me," she said, rolling her eyes. "I need someone who excites me, who has vision, someone who knows how to take risks and live life to the fullest." Ryan nodded once, almost as if he were agreeing with her. "Good luck with that," he said simply. Julia's smirk deepened. She had expected some kind of fight, some last-ditch effort to win her back, maybe even a little begging, but this was almost too easy. It made her choice feel even more justified. Daniel was everything Ryan wasn't. Charismatic, flashy, spontaneous, he drove a sleek European car that turned heads. He wore designer suits with effortless charm, and the way he talked, the way he made promises, it was thrilling. When he told her he had big plans, that he was investing in something huge, she believed him. Ryan, on the other hand, had always been steady, predictable. Sure, he was successful in his own way, but he never took risks. He never chased wealth the way real winners did. And Julia, she was tired of waiting around for a man who thought success was just about stability and long-term security. So she walked away without a second glance. What she didn't realize, what she would only come to understand much, much later, was that Ryan's silence wasn't weakness. It wasn't resignation. It was something far deadlier. It was certainty. Months passed. Julia barely thought about him. She was too busy living the high life with Daniel, traveling to luxury destinations, sipping champagne at exclusive parties. Everything seemed perfect until the cracks started to show. A missed payment here, a vague excuse there. Her savings, once solid, were mysteriously shrinking, but Daniel always had an explanation. An investment tied up, a temporary setback. And then one day, she checked her bank account. Zero. Julia's hands trembled as she picked up her phone. She dialed Ryan. When he answered, his voice was smooth, unbothered. "I miss you," she whispered. Ryan chuckled softly. "I don't miss you at all." Julia's heart pounded as she stared at the empty numbers on her screen. The disbelief made her breath shallow, her fingers numb against the cold glass of her phone. She blinked hard, refreshing the banking app, willing the numbers to change, for the nightmare to be a glitch, a momentary mistake in the system. But nothing changed. Her balance was still zero. For the first time in months, a cold dread settled over her, cutting through the expensive perfume, the designer silk robe she had wrapped around herself. Her mind raced, struggling to put the pieces together. Daniel had promised her everything: wealth, luxury, security. He had whispered in her ear about smart investments, about doubling what she already had. She had trusted him, given him access, let him handle things because, as he had put it, she was too smart to waste time worrying about money. She had believed him. Now, staring at her drained accounts, she saw the truth. The so-called successful entrepreneur wasn't a genius investor. He was a con artist. And she had fallen for it, completely. Stupidly. Her hands trembled as she grabbed her phone, dialing his number, desperate for an explanation. It went straight to voicemail. No. She tried again and again. Each time, the same robotic response: "The number you are trying to reach is no longer in service." A sickening wave of nausea twisted in her stomach. Julia stumbled out of the bedroom, her bare feet pressing against the cold marble floors of the penthouse she had been so proud to move into. She scanned the space frantically, searching for any sign that Daniel was still here, that this was all some kind of misunderstanding. But the apartment, once filled with expensive watches, leather briefcases, and tailored jackets, was eerily empty. His things, his presence, had been wiped clean. Panic clawed at her throat. Her mind reeled as she sprinted to the walk-in closet, yanking open drawers, flinging open doors. The expensive suits? Gone. The watch collection he had once shown off? Gone. Even the cologne he always wore, a scent she had once found intoxicating, had disappeared, without a trace. The only thing left behind was a single envelope resting on the glass vanity where she had spent hours perfecting her makeup, believing she was a woman on top of the world. With shaking hands, she tore it open. Inside, in Daniel's perfectly elegant handwriting, were 4 words. "You were a pleasure." The room spun. Julia's knees buckled, and she grabbed the vanity for support. A scream built in her throat, but no sound came out. She had laughed at Ryan. She had looked him in the eye and told him he was too simple for her. She had been so sure that she was moving up in life, so certain that Daniel was the golden ticket to a future of endless luxury, but she hadn't upgraded. She had been played, and now she had nothing. Tears burned her eyes as she picked up her phone again, scrolling frantically through her contacts. Who could she call? Her friends? No. They had warned her about moving too fast, about trusting too easily. They would only say, "I told you so." Her family? Out of the question. She had distanced herself, made it clear that she was independent, that she didn't need their approval. That left one person, the only person she knew who had never lied to her, never deceived her. Right? Swallowing her pride, she tapped his name and hit call. It rang once, twice. Then he answered. His voice was steady, smooth, untouched by the desperation clawing at her. Julia? She almost collapsed in relief. Ryan, she gasped, her voice breaking. I need to see you. Please. There was a pause. Not the pause of someone eager to jump in and save her, but the kind that stretched with quiet confidence. The kind that made her stomach drop even further. Why? He asked finally, his tone unreadable. Julia clenched her eyes shut, hating how pathetic she sounded. It's Daniel. He took everything. I have nothing left. Another silence. Then a soft, low chuckle. It sent a chill through her. I see, Ryan said simply. Julia waited, breathless, hoping, praying that he would offer help, comfort, a way out of this disaster. Instead, his voice dropped, cold and detached. I told you I don't miss you at all. And with that, the line went dead. Julia stared at the screen in horror. For the first time in her life, she truly understood what it meant to lose. And the worst part, Ryan wasn't even looking back. Julia's hands went limp, her phone slipping from her grasp and landing on the pristine marble floor with a hollow clack. Her lips parted slightly as if still trying to form words, as if still trying to process the finality in Ryan's voice. This couldn't be real. For months, she had been so certain, so sure, that she was stepping into a new, better life. When she had walked out of Brian's apartment, suitcase in hand, she had felt victorious. She had convinced herself that she was leaving behind something less in exchange for something more. And yet here she was, alone, broke, utterly humiliated. She bent down slowly, picking up her phone with shaky fingers. The call log still displayed Ryan's name, but there was no redial option. It was as if the call had never happened, as if he had erased her from his life, the way she had once so easily erased him from hers. Her throat tightened as she scrolled through their old messages. There they were, conversations from months ago, full of warmth and laughter, late-night texts where he had told her about his plans, his ambitions, messages where he had asked how her day was, genuinely interested in every small detail. And then the last one, the last time he had reached out to her. I hope this is what you really want. Take care, Julia. She had left him on read. She had smiled at that message at the time, basking in the glow of her new beginning with Daniel. She had assumed Ryan would always be there, waiting in the background, just in case she ever wanted to look back. But she had been wrong. Julia sat down on the edge of the bed, her bed technically, but it no longer felt like hers. Nothing in this apartment felt like hers anymore. The silk sheets, the diamond earrings on the nightstand, the designer dresses in the closet, every single thing had been chosen under Daniel's influence. Now, all of it felt meaningless. A sob bubbled up in her throat, but she swallowed it down. Crying wouldn't fix this. Think. She needed to think. Her hands clenched into fists as she forced herself to stand up. She wasn't completely powerless. She could call the police, report Daniel for fraud. She could track him down, find out where he had gone, make him pay for what he did. Or maybe she could reach out to Ryan again, explain things better, make him see how much she regretted everything. But even as the thought crossed her mind, a deep, aching shame spread through her chest. She had burned that bridge. Ryan had been the one person who had never deceived her, never sold her a dream that didn't exist, and she had thrown him away for someone who had done exactly that. With a heavy heart, she forced herself to shower, dress, and step outside. The city air was crisp, the evening lights flickering like false promises, illuminating a world she no longer belonged to. She walked aimlessly, her designer heels clicking against the pavement. Once, she had felt powerful in them, unstoppable. Now they just felt like a reminder of everything she had lost. At some point, she found herself standing in front of a familiar cafe, Ryan's favorite spot. She hesitated. Would he be here? Would he even acknowledge her if he saw her? Through the large windows, she spotted him. And then her stomach dropped. Ryan wasn't alone. Across the table sat a woman, beautiful, elegant, laughing at something he had just said. Ryan looked at ease, relaxed in a way Julia had never seen before. He leaned in slightly, his body language open, engaged. There was no bitterness in his expression, no trace of the heartbreak she had assumed he must have carried after she left. He wasn't mourning her. He had moved on. Julia's fingers dug into her palm. She wanted to walk in. She wanted to interrupt, to demand what? An explanation? An apology? A second chance? But she had lost the right to any of those things. Instead, she pulled out her phone, her fingers hovering over the text box. I miss you. She hesitated, staring at the words. Then, her breath caught in her throat as she saw the unmistakable sign. He had read it. No reply. Julia felt something inside her crack, splintering under the weight of realization. Ryan wasn't ignoring her out of anger. He wasn't trying to punish her. He simply didn't care anymore. She had been replaced, and that was her real punishment. Her hands trembled as she deleted the message. With one last glance at Ryan, at the man she had once taken for granted, she turned and walked away. And this time, he wasn't watching her go. Julia walked away from the cafe, her stomach twisting with something far worse than regret. Finality. It was over. Not just her relationship with Ryan, but any possibility of undoing what she had done. It wasn't just that he had moved on. It was how effortlessly, how completely. There was no trace of longing in his face, no hesitation when he ignored her message. He hadn't even considered responding. The worst part, she had no one to blame but herself. She wandered aimlessly through the streets, the bright city lights casting long shadows on the pavement beneath her. The heels she once loved felt heavy, almost unbearable with each step. She had spent so long chasing a fantasy that she had lost sight of reality. The reality that Ryan had been real. Everything about him, his steady presence, his quiet ambition, the way he had always shown his love rather than speaking empty words, had been genuine. And she had thrown it away for a dream spun out of illusions. Sold to her by a man who never cared for anything beyond his own gain. Her phone vibrated in her hand, yanking her from her thoughts. For a fleeting second, her heart leapt. Had Ryan changed his mind? But when she glanced at the screen, the hope evaporated. It was her bank. Another overdraft notification. Julia gritted her teeth and shoved the phone back into her pocket, her hands clenching into fists. She had to fix this. But how? Her old friends had already distanced themselves from her when she started flaunting Daniel and his extravagant lifestyle. She had made it clear that she no longer needed their company, that she was moving into a world where only the rich and powerful mattered. Her family? She had barely spoken to them since leaving Ryan. They had warned her about Daniel, cautioned her against trusting someone who seemed too good to be true. She had laughed them off, convinced they were just jealous or didn't understand what she deserved. Now she couldn't bear the thought of calling them, of hearing the quiet disappointment in their voices. Her pride had built the walls that now trapped her. She exhaled sharply, forcing herself to think. She wasn't completely helpless. She still had some things left, her jewelry, the designer bags and clothes, the pieces of luxury she had once flaunted so easily. She could sell them, start over. A cab passed by and she raised her hand, stopping it without hesitation. She gave the driver her address, sinking into the back seat, pressing her forehead against the cool glass. By the time she arrived at the penthouse, Daniel's penthouse, though she had once believed it was theirs, the building felt foreign to her. The doorman gave her a pitying glance as he opened the door, as if he already knew what she had just discovered. Daniel had done this before, and she had been just another fool on his list. Her chest tightened, but she forced herself forward, stepping into the apartment with renewed determination. She went straight to the bedroom, yanking open drawers and pulling clothes from hangers. She would sell whatever she could. She would not let this be the end of her. But as she reached for the velvet box that held the diamond bracelet Daniel had given her, a sharp realization hit her. The box was empty. Her breath caught. She tore through the drawers, searching frantically. Then she checked the nightstand, the bathroom, even under the bed. Nothing. Panic surged through her as she ran to the closet, where her collection of luxury handbags had once been neatly arranged. Oh, one by one, she checked every shelf, every drawer, every possible hiding spot. Everything valuable was missing. Julia staggered back, gripping the edge of the dresser as the full weight of her situation crashed over her. Daniel hadn't just emptied her accounts. He had taken everything. The apartment still looked the same, but it was nothing more than an empty shell, a stage set for the illusion he had created. Her vision blurred as she collapsed onto the edge of the bed. She had nothing, no money, no belongings, no safety net. For years, she had believed she was special, that she was smarter than the other women who had made bad choices, that she would never be the one left with nothing. And yet, here she was. A bitter laugh escaped her lips. It was almost poetic, wasn't it? She had left Ryan because she thought she was trading up. Instead, she had been discarded like an afterthought. Her phone buzzed again, and for a brief, desperate moment, she hoped, prayed it was Ryan, that maybe he had some lingering affection for her, some desire to help. But when she looked at the screen, it was another message from the bank. Her account had been officially closed due to insufficient funds. Julia let the phone slip from her fingers. This was it, the moment where she had to face what she had done. Not just to Ryan, but to herself. There was no going back. She had burned every bridge, and now she was completely and utterly alone. Julia sat motionless on the edge of the bed, her fingers limp against the silk sheets that had once felt luxurious beneath her touch. The apartment was silent now, except for the distant hum of the city beyond the floor-to-ceiling windows. But that world, the glittering, intoxicating world she had thought she belonged to, was no longer hers. It had never been. Daniel had taken everything, down to the last designer bag, the last pair of red-bottom heels. And the worst part? She had handed it all to him on a silver platter, believing every lie, every whispered promise. She had nothing left. Her phone lay beside her, screen still glowing with the cold finality of the bank's message. Account closed. No funds. No safety net. No way out. Her throat tightened as she considered her options. She could go to the police, file a fraud report, try to track Daniel down, but she already knew how that would go. Men like him didn't leave trails. He had charmed his way into her life, just as he had undoubtedly done with others before her. He wouldn't have made the mistake of leaving anything traceable. And even if she could find him, what would she do? Beg? Threaten? Demand what she had willingly given up? No, she had played this game and she had lost. Her hands clenched into fists as she squeezed her eyes shut. For the first time in her life, there was no backup plan, no convenient escape. She had walked away from Ryan thinking she would never need him again. Now, he was the only person in the world she wished she could turn to. But that door was closed. No, it slammed shut. She had seen it in his eyes when she sent that message. He hadn't ignored her out of anger or spite. He had simply moved on so completely that she no longer even existed in his world. A fresh wave of nausea hit her at the thought. Ryan had always been the kind of man who gave without expecting anything in return, who had supported her even when she didn't deserve it. She had assumed that meant he would always be there, waiting in the background, just in case she ever wanted to turn back. She had underestimated him, just like she had underestimated the consequences of her own choices. Swallowing the lump in her throat, Julia forced herself to stand. The apartment no longer felt like a home. It was nothing more than an empty, meaningless space. She had thought wealth and luxury would make her feel powerful, but now, stripped of it all, she realized how fragile that illusion had been. Her only option was to start over. But where? Who would take her in? Who would offer her a second chance when she had spent the last year burning every bridge, dismissing every warning? Her parents had been disappointed in her for months. Her friends, at least the real ones, had distanced themselves when she had made it clear that she was above them. She was completely alone. The realization settled heavily on her chest. For the first time in her life, Julia had to face the truth. No one was coming to save her. Not Ryan, not her family, not Daniel, and maybe, just maybe, that was the most painful lesson of all. She grabbed her purse, the only thing Daniel had left behind, and walked toward the door. She didn't know where she was going yet, but she knew one thing: she would never make this mistake again. Because this time, she wasn't losing money. She had lost everything, and no one was left to care.